So, Reba and Mark are here to talk about changing brains and some of the neuroscience and the direct application of that. And really looking forward to hearing this session. It's an area I'm certainly very interested in. And so I just wanted to start with 2 minutes of this video, and there'll be a bit more of it to come later after their talk.
It's new, it's cutting edge. I mean, I'm writing about very cutting edge things.
That's Canadian brain researcher Dr. Norman Doidge making waves again. His first book explained the theory of neuroplasticity, the discovery that the brain can change. Now, in a new book, he says he's found evidence the brain can be rewired to help treat people with everything from Parkinson's disease to autism. And he's challenging the medical community to be more supportive of these new approaches. I sat down with him earlier this week. But first, some background. For years, the brain has been described as a machine.
I learned that the brain was pretty much hardwired, and that what you get by the age of 18, you're left with.
And if damaged, little repair could be done.
I was operating from that model, which is that this is a broken brain and it's irretrievably broken.
Dr. Norman Doidge is part of a growing sector of mainstream scientific research, throwing that thinking upside down.
I'm here today to describe what I've come to believe is the most important change in our understanding of the human brain in 400 years.
It's the revolutionary theory of neuroplasticity, that the brain can be repaired, even rewired.
The discovery of neuroplasticity is the discovery that our brains can change their structure and function through mental experience alone.
He tells the stories of how people with chronic pain, stroke, traumatic brain injury, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, autism, ADHD, or some kinds of blindness have seen radical improvements by focused thought and movement, training new parts of the brain to take over from damaged ones. Doidge has written all about it in his new book, The Brain's Way of Healing. We met up earlier this week in Toronto.
Okay, please welcome Reba and Mark.
Thank you for coming today. Today, we're just going to present an amazing journey that Mark has done as a result of the principles that Dr. Norman Doidge talked about in the DVD that we just saw. And the reason why, can you everybody hear me? Yes. Yeah. And so we're not going to go into a big philosophical journey. We're just going to say how sometimes we can take a principle, apply it, hoping for the best, and be amazed at what happens on the other end. Okay? Where did it go? Okay. Mark, you did the Cogmed Program. Yeah. Can everybody hear Mark?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay. Now, can you tell us what is Cogmed?
Numbers and shapes.
Numbers and shapes. Okay. And so that was on a program?
Yes.
Yes. And that required an iPad?
Yes.
Had you ever used an iPad before? No. So that was a new experience for you. Okay. And so the program was you looked at numbers and shapes.
Yes.
And what did you have to do with those numbers and shapes?
Had to have so many numbers going forward, and then double numbers going forward, and double numbers going backwards, which was there was about 8 or 9 double numbers going forward, and then 8 or 9 double numbers going backwards, which was pretty darn hard. And then shapes and shapes, yeah, which was pretty easy going forward and going backwards. Numbers in general were pretty hard.
An interesting book.
Thank you.
You talk about one case, another doctor who had
That was good. And there were also some craters,
Yeah.
monsters coming
Yeah.
out of the craters. And what did you have to do with the monsters? Put them back
Yeah.
in the right order.
Yeah.
That they came up.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're talking about you getting to 7, almost 8 numbers
Yeah.
that you could remember
Mm.
and keeping in the row. But when you started, you couldn't remember 7.
No.
So how many could you remember?
Oh, about 4.
Yeah.
About 4 most have been improved.
Yeah. 4 was after you started a little bit.
Mm.
Yeah. And Christine coached you.
Yeah.
Yes. So Christine coached you, and you went through the exercises. So how often did you do the exercises?
Once a week.
That's what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not what we did. No. You
No,
know?
I was doing it so many times a week.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the beginning we started very intensive.
Yes.
Okay, about 4 times a week.
Mm.
Because we wanted 5 times, but it was not possible.
No.
So we had to change the program to make it fit, which was something more realistic,
Yes.
which was 4 times a week.
Yes.
Okay, and you did that for a very intensive period,
Yes.
for about 10 weeks.
Yeah, that's 2 weeks.
And after the 10 weeks, what happened?
It finished.
It finished.
Yeah.
And then we had another meeting with Christine.
Yes.
And she did another test to see how many numbers you remembered. and-
Yes.
Yeah. And what did that test show?
So good.
You had
Yes.
progressed quite a bit, didn't it? Okay. And then we asked you a question because it was so hard doing the Cogmed for you. There were times that were really difficult.
Yes.
Do you want to share with the other people how difficult it had been sometimes?
It was fairly difficult. It all depends how the brain, how I was in general, but it was so difficult and a bit harder and a bit harder than that now. It's so to give it up, completely. I was getting so angry with myself for doing bad or doing not too good. But I was trying all the time.
And what would Christine tell you when you were going through one of your down phases where you wanted to take that iPad? What did you want to do with it?
Yeah. That's why it was time friends. Yeah.
So what did Christine tell you when you were feeling like that?
Yeah, well, just go outside for 5 minutes and just cool off.
That's right. And you did some breathing as well.
Yes.
And did she have any of those moments as well when she was doing the Cogmed?
No.
No?
She started to get irritant sometimes and near the end, so it was time for her to cool off.
Yeah. And so we asked you, we saw the results and we said, wow, Mark, you were here and now you're here.
Yeah.
And you could also start to see changes. You
Yeah.
could remember things.
Mm.
You were more alert.
Yeah.
And because you were more alert and you were happy, what did you do? We said, Mark, if you want, we can do an extension of 100 sessions
Yeah.
every year.
Mm.
Would you like to try that?
No.
No. At the time, did you do the extension?
I did briefly extension, but not
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. You didn't finish the 100 sessions
No.
on top of the first 10 weeks, but you did, I think in total you did 101 sessions.
Yeah.
But that's including the intensive part.
Yeah.
But you did pretty well.
Mm.
It was about 7 or 8 months
Yeah.
that you did that.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was, and we were amazed when you said you'd give it a go. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed when you said because, yeah, I'm going to go back. Why did you say yes to doing the Cogmed, you know?
To see what I could do.
To see what you could do.
Yeah.
Because we had
To
tried
see how
that.
good I was.
Yeah. And part of it was because you were a bit lonely.
Yeah.
And what else?
Bit lonely and a bit uptight.
Uptight. Yeah. And that was making life in general difficult.
Yes.
Because people would come and visit you, and then what would happen?
I wouldn't have that much to say or that much to talk
And then sometimes it was hard to remember that.
Yeah.
day.
Sometimes I'm able to talk a bit, but and then there's other times I'm not able to talk that much. It all depends on just how I am. 2002.
Yeah. But now, I have to say, you are able to talk much more than before.
Yeah, I do.
What are some of the other things that you feel more comfortable? Like a year ago, would you have been able to talk to?
Now I'm shaking down knees. Shaking
Yeah.
big nerves, but now I'm able to.
And another thing, when Bronwyn came and visited you and said, Mark, I'm going to go present your poster
Yes.
to Queensland, Daydream Island. And she came and she got to know you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you remember who was there? You don't remember? Okay. It was Bronwyn, you and I, but somebody else came in because he had forgotten the iPad and he brought it back. Russell? Russell? He came to bring the iPad. So at the point in time, there were 4 of us talking. Yeah. And did you get lost?
No,
you didn't?
No, I tried to keep to what I was supposed to say, what I was supposed to talk about.
Yeah. And you were not turning your head right and left
No.
because you were confused,
Yeah,
like you
no.
would have done before.
Yes.
You were able to talk to Bron pretty well.
Yes.
And I was just talking at a normal pace that I would with anybody else, and you were able to, well, Rima checked, and maybe I was speaking too fast, but you said, no, I understand completely,
Yeah.
which is really impressive.
Yes.
And I stayed with the image of the old Mark, where we would have had to slow down to make sure
Yeah.
that you can follow and
Yeah.
whatever. But you told me off. You said, no, it's okay. I
Yeah.
can follow."
Yeah.
So these are important changes for you.
Yes.
Okay. And why are you coming to tell all these people your journey today?
Because I wanted to.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that also that you said okay for Bronwyn going to Queensland because you wanted other people to know about it.
Yes.
And when I asked you, do you think this is important for other people to do the same? Would you like other people to have the opportunity
Yes.
to do the same?
I said yes.
You said yes. Although it was not easy for you.
No.
No, because you're kind of quiet usually.
Yes, I'm quiet, but I don't get much of an opportunity to talk daytime and talk any time at all. It's pretty hard.
But you'd like to change that now. Because now you can understand other people talking and you can understand the conversations as they happen. Yeah. So you would like to join in,
Yes.
but we don't really know yet how to. So this is maybe something we can work with. We're going to work on.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I know this is a bit personal. Is it okay?
That doesn't matter.
All right. I saw that you had your sleeves up, showing a bit of your tattoo. Do you want to show your tattoo to everyone?
Death before December.
And this is really you, isn't it?
Yes.
And you want to tell everyone when you had that tattoo done?
When I was 16. 16, I had done just before the car accident. And just before the car accident, I was rushed into hospital, and I just didn't move at all. And then I moved, and the nurse said he's still alive, so I was operated on once on the head, and then I was operated again, and then I finally pulled through. But I was introduced in bed for some time, and then I just came back to life. I was unconscious for some time, introduced in bed, and my eyes opened, and I started to, what is this place? Who am I with? Where am I? But I didn't have any thought about anything, because it's not hard to think that well, so I didn't know what was happening. So I just went to the hospital and what was it. And I went through rehabilitation to get back together again. And that's what been good.
And you had 20 years of rehabilitation,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Yeah.
And support, but you were still lonely.
Yeah.
Okay, so all the traditional rehabilitation that was done, you had a lot of it.
Yeah.
but you were still very sad and lonely.
Yeah.
weren't you?
Mm.
And so that's really why you said, I told you, Mark, this is the book, this is the guy, this is what he's saying. I've tried it changed my life. Do you want to try it? Remember?
Yeah.
And he said, we'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Because since the accident, you were not the same person that you were before the motor vehicle accident. You were, and you wanted to get back to full function.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, Mark, I'm going to say thank you very much for sharing your story. And we're going to continue to listen about other applications that can happen. Mark chose the Cogmed Program because it targets specifically working memory and attention, and because that was what was the most difficult for you is you couldn't remember people who visited, you couldn't remember what they talked about, you couldn't fit in with the conversations, and this is why we chose that program. So that program was the right program for you, but that's not the program that I use. And other people may use other programs, so there are lots of other neuroplasticity applications. And we're just starting to discover the first layer after layer. So maybe what we do now is we're going to sit down and watch with the rest of that video, and then we look at other people, what they used. And it's not going to be long. But if you're interested and you want to know more, you can contact Mark or myself. And we're happy to give you more information later on.
Thank you.
Parkinson's disease, multiple movement, training new parts of the brain to take over from damaged ones. Deutsch has written all about it in his new book, The Brain's Way of Healing. We met up earlier this week in Toronto. This is such an interesting book.
Thank you.
You talk about one case, another doctor who had experienced many years of chronic neck pain.
Yeah.
And he was able to cure himself by flooding his brain. Explain that.
Dr. Michael Moskowitz was a psychiatrist who became a pain specialist. He had the following thought, I've been teaching my residents that there are these switches in the brain that can turn off pain.
So it's not the neck that actually hurts, it's the brain sending a signal that your neck hurts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole system, but there are gates that go all the way from the body up to the brain.
And if you can stop the signal, then...
And you can stop the signal. That's what anesthetic does. And drugs also do that. You stop the signal.
And you can do that through a thought process.
He was able to do that in this situation, and he's since worked with a number of patients, many patients. And I wrote about him and his first patient, but I saw many of his patients, and a lot of them went completely off medication. Some they still have very, very damaged body parts, but interestingly, they can be pain-free.
The next chapter is about a fellow in South Africa with Parkinson's who walked off some of his symptoms.
Yes. John Pepper had his first early symptoms of Parkinson's in his 30s.
Instead of losing mobility, he became more mobile. He taught himself.
He became more mobile, with what he called his conscious walking technique. And
What's conscious walking?
Well, just being aware that you're not going to just start to walk, but you're going to lift your right leg, swing it forward at the knee, shift your weight down to your right foot.
So in doing that, he was creating...
Yes. It's
developing a different part of his brain?
Yes, he was using that part of his brain to get himself moving. But the second part is key, which is, it turns out walking is really important for the brain. It's only in anatomy textbooks that the brain and the body are separate. In reality, the brain is seamlessly connected to the body. And we know that when animals walk and when people walk, they generate two things that are really crucial for any human being's brain health. They generate brain growth factors of several kinds that consolidate the connections between the nerve cells when we learn or do a skill. And they actually generate some new cells in a small part of the brain involved in memory. What's so wonderful about this story is people say, well, maybe that's a one-off. Well, it's not a one-off. We've got major studies coming out now from the Mayo Clinic and many other sources showing that walking programs, movement programs, and exercise programs significantly decrease movement problems in Parkinson's patients, and it improves their mood as well.
And yet, he was a big deal in the Parkinson's community, and he was kind of kicked out for giving people false hopes.
Yeah, he was actually the head of the patient group, and some people saw him moving. They weren't his neurologists. They had never examined him. But, you know, people who are caught in this idea that the brain is fixed, the pre-neuroplastic view, that its circuitry is formed and finalized in childhood. I call it the doctrine of the unchanging brain because it's like a doctrine. It's an abstract concept. Have a lot of difficulty accepting that activity of various kinds, mental and physical, might actually alter brain structure clinically.
A lot of people suffer from autism, ADHD. It's pretty common these days. You say that this theory can be applied there as well. How?
The new research is showing that children with autism have inflammation throughout their bodies. Autism is not just a disease of the brain, it's a whole body disease that affects the brain.
Help that then?
Well, the inflamed brain of autistic children, it's very common that it's inflamed, but it's very underconnected. Now, you might have noticed that autistic children often cover their ears. They find loud sounds, certain kinds of sounds, very, very unpleasant, and they're hypersensitive to them. And when you walk into a room, it's usually very noisy, and then you can sort of focus in on various conversations, and that's because the ear has within it an auditory zoom, like a zoom lens on a camera. And that auditory zoom is not working in a lot of autistic children. And so what they hear are not the higher frequencies of human speech, but the low sounds of predators, the kinds of things that you hear when you go see Jaws, and there's that, you know, that low rumbling sound. So it's possible to use music that's been modified to actually train that auditory zoom and the brain circuitry involved with that.
You've seen kids help with this?
Yes.
What kind of difference does it make?
One kid who had moderate to severe autism, who basically had no language, wasn't communicating at all with his parents, no eye contact, temper tantrums all the time. His parents were told he'd be institutionalized, and they were brokenhearted that they had no relationship with him, but that was the hardest part. In the first week of treatment, he slept for the first time the parents could remember. He looked up to his mother after the first or second treatment. On the second day, he hugged his father for the first time spontaneously. I mean,
so why doesn't everybody do this? Why don't all the parents with autistic kids come and...
Why don't we live in a medical utopia where cutting-edge treatments are translated?
Why aren't all the doctors recommending this then?
I think people are too much under the influence of the idea that autism is simply genetic as opposed to a genetic environment interaction. Two, the studies showing the underconnection in autism in the autistic brain are all very recent. Three, this idea of talking to the brain in its own language is new, it's cutting edge. I mean, I'm writing about very cutting edge things, so it takes a while for these things to roll out, and there are still people who were educated, as was I, to believe that the brain is hardwired.
You say that the mind can alter the brain. Where is the mind? It's not in the brain.
No one knows for sure, I think.
You've got 5 minutes, so yeah, if there's questions or...
You used other strategies, compensation strategies.
Yes, we did. Everybody can hear me? Couldn't hear the question. Bronwyn was saying that...
yeah, good point.
Yeah?
Just because it's being filmed from people who can't hear, if you could get
Mark,
pop back up
I think
on the
we're going to
stage,
pop back up. All right.
a bit easier.
We're going to do some gym today. How are you? Okay. the question for everybody, the question that Bronwyn was asking was, we didn't only use Cogmed, we used also compensatory strategies, and we used a range of compensatory strategies. So what are other things that you did other than the program of Cogmed? You know, when we worked with Shannon who came, we used the iPad to do some things. So what did we do with the iPad? We did the programs, but we also do. Yeah, and we took pictures.
Yeah.
Okay. So the compensatory strategies are still a work in progress, but some of the things that we did put in place were when somebody comes into the house, what do they have to sign? The book. So a visitor's book was set up so that anybody who came to visit Mark would write in the book. And then, for example, when I came to visit you, we would go through the book and see, okay, oh, Russell came last week, and you went to TAFE with him, or you did this and this. And that would help remind us, of how the week went, whatever we needed to look at before. So the visitor book was a good way to go over the events that happened in your life recently. Another strategy we used was the pictures. You remember we had lots of pictures, and you didn't like to. No. At beginning, Mark was posing like. And then we saw different pictures of you with the different hairstyles. And that became easier because finally you were able to take the whole pictures. And so we had lots of pictures and lots of album pictures. Because the agency decided to do the album in a way, somebody else would come and decide to do it in another way, and somebody else. So it was a bit of a mess at the point of time. But it was still good to have the pictures. Yeah. So, and we use the calendar. Yeah. Now you have a whiteboard that has always been there. What's on the whiteboard?
Things important to me.
Okay. Absolutely. So some of the things that are on that whiteboard.
Yoga, kata, swimming, and TAFE.
Yeah. So you have what you're doing in the week, and you have the contact numbers of everybody. Okay. And you have the contact of the transport. And sometimes it was difficult to know what transport was for what activity. So we tried to align them together. Yeah. So you would know. So, and you had some pictures of you gardening as well. Yeah. Okay. And one of the things also that we did was we did the talking mats. Remember? Yeah. What was really nice about the talking mats?
Good to go into, good to start.
Yeah.
And do it.
Yeah. The talking mats is really a mat where we try to look at everything that Mark you liked was on one side, you didn't like was on another side, and everything that's in between or you would like to try was in the middle. And we ended up spending an hour and a half on the talking mat. And that was after Cogmed, because you had so many memories that were coming back. And I remember you told me about the ukulele, you know, the small guitar. You want to tell the story?
Since ukulele, I played a long time ago, and then someone brought the ukulele back to my place, and I tried to play it again, and it wasn't too good.
That's right, but you had fun. That was the important thing. So we discovered lots of things we had no idea about you, and you remembered lots of things that you had done with your mom and dad before that were not, that you couldn't access before. Yeah. So that was really nice, and we discovered also that you loved the Bee Gees and Dame.
That is going to be Newton John.
That's right. And so that allowed us also to get some of the CDs. If anybody has a DVD of anything you can show, please let us know. We're on the lookout because it's an old DVD and we can't find them. So if anybody has them, that would be really nice. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.